Hey everyone, great to be live with you again. Well, it was a stunning night in the Republican primaries last night in North Carolina. Congressional Rising Star Representative Madison Cawthorn ousted by a random guy. Some people saw this coming, others did not. Now, something very strange happened just over a week before the primaries. The local news covered it. There was a very large number of unaffiliated voters that were turning out big time with, you guessed it, mail in ballots. These unaffiliated voters. We're going to dig into the local news reports on that and figure out what's really going on. Now, Madison Cawthorn kept it so real. He was so loyal to the truth and his constituents, it seemed, that he turned both Republicans and Democrats against him when he called out orgies in Washington. He literally outed the fact that Republicans in Washington, D.C. are doing cocaine-fueled sex parties. And a lot of Republicans got really upset at him in regards to that. So who's this new guy taking over, filling Madison Cawthorn's shoes? Is he going to represent his constituents, or is he just excited for these orgies? We're going to dig into who this guy is, and we are going to talk about some other things, including breaking news about the Disinformation Governance Board. It's apparently being dissolved, and that lady who became so quickly notorious for leading that governance board is apparently resigning. So before we dive into everything, shout out to the sponsor of my coverage. Check this out. A recent study reveals that our home's indoor air is up to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air. The study also says that lead, radon, tobacco smoke, and more can all increase the toxicity in our home's air. This is why I am such a huge fan of home air purifiers. This device uses best-in-class purifying technology. I have the device right here. To scrub 99.7% of indoor air pollutants. Its 3-stage purification process makes your home air healthier for you and your family to breathe. I noticed a huge difference after just the first night with this running in the background. I woke up to feel like I had the best night's sleep in years. If you want to make your home healthier, get a portable air purifier for up to 50% off during this Father's Day special happening now. Go to amazingcleanair.com. That amazingcleanair.com is linked down in my description. That is www.amazingcleanair.com. Click that link in description. Highly recommend it, especially if you have, maybe an older home. You want to make sure that there's nothing toxic in the air you're breathing every day. Okay, guys, I have got to show you this clip out of North Carolina. We're talking about deep red Western North Carolina elbowing up against deep red Eastern Tennessee. This is the most Republican area of the country. So who are all these unaffiliated voters, people who didn't want to register Republican, voting all of a sudden for a Republican? That's not Cawthorn. Let's look at the local news.
And the North Carolina primary is 1 week from tomorrow, and already so many ballots have been cast in Western North Carolina. News 13's Anjali Patel shows us how more people are making their voices heard early this year, particularly unaffiliated voters.
Unaffiliated voters can choose a Democrat or Republican ballot in the primary, and so far a lot of the ones who have voted absentee or at early voting locations like this one in NC11 are choosing Republican. Unaffiliated voters are now the largest group of voters in North Carolina, and they're showing up in droves ahead of the primary, especially in NC11, where they make up almost half, 42% of the Republican ballots cast so far.
That is about twice what other districts are. I mean, this is a huge number. I've never seen anything like it.
Across North Carolina, just about 33% of the voters who've cast Republican ballots so far are unaffiliated. And political expert Dr. Chris Cooper says he doesn't think many of the ones in NC11 are voting for the embattled incumbent.
But I think most people believe, and I do too, that this is not good news for Madison Cawthorn. That does not mean that he's going to lose, but it it does look like the traditional Republican voters who voted for him last time are a smaller share of the electorate this time.
And if there's a primary runoff, those unaffiliated who voted Republican will have to do so again. But that may not be the case in November.
And we know that there are some people, just anecdotally, right? You talk to people. Some of them are going to the Republican primary to vote against Cawthorn, frankly. And so in the general election, they might do something very, very different.
Overall, the heightened political activism right now is evident across the state, and especially in the mountains. We're 8 days out from the primary and outpacing the turnout we'd seen at this point 4 years ago. Not compared to 2 years ago. Of course, more people voted early then due to COVID-19.
NC11 folks are turning out more than they did in 2018, not quite as much as they did in 2020, and more than they are in the rest of the state.
Dr. Cooper reminding, though, that what looks like great turnout now could end up being average if people don't show up to the polls on May 17th. Now, some important dates to remember. The deadline to request an absentee ballot is Tuesday at 5 p.m. and early voting will continue until Saturday, May 14th at 3 p.m. Reporting in Buncombe County, Anjali Patel, News 13.
Just to give you guys a visual, this is Madison Cawthorn's district at the far western part of North Carolina. That's east, right next to it. Very red area, always goes to Republicans, although it does have leftist Asheville located there as well. So there are a lot of hippie leftists living in Asheville, North Carolina. So Cawthorn lost by just 1,300 votes, incredibly close race. And so the question is, apparently there were a lot of mail-in votes from people who did not register as Republican, voting for Republicans. According to the news, 42%, a week before the election, it was 42% of the Republican ballots were unaffiliated voters. So these are people who neither registered as Republican or Democrat. In North Carolina, you can choose to register for a particular party or just register unaffiliated. So is there something sketchy? I was just, my initial reaction when I saw last night that Cawthorn was just dethroned after he was such a rock star on the right, you know, on the Turning Point stages, everyone loved him. He was endorsed by Donald Trump. And as we've seen in previous primaries, all Trump's endorsees win. If they have Trump behind them, they win. Here Cawthorn is on stage with Trump, on stage with Turning Point, right-wing rock star, standing his ground for his people, and suddenly he is thrown out by a guy we've never heard of before. So my initial reaction was like, did Kevin McCarthy hire some mules? I'm sure you guys saw Dinesh D'Souza's new film about the mules. I was just like, what's going on? How many mules did Kevin McCarthy hire? Because as you recall, Kevin McCarthy was very disappointed in Madison Cawthorn after he went on a podcast, what was it, a month or two ago? And when he was asked how similar to House of Cards Congress is, Cawthorn said, quite similar. In fact, I've even been invited to cocaine-fueled orgies invited by these right-wing people that he looked up to, he said. And suddenly he's like, hold up. There's a sexual get-together at your house and you want me to go? And you're some Republican that I've looked up to? And Cawthorn's like, ooh, I don't know about this. So he literally outed these Republican members of Congress for doing orgies at, you know, very publicly. And before you know it, McCarthy's pulling him into his office saying he's made a grave mistake. Next thing you know, Cawthorn is hated by the left and the right-wing establishment, just like a lot of Cawthorn's constituents are. A lot of Americans are getting fed up with the left and right-wing establishment. But next thing he knows, he's getting attacked from all sides because the left was already incessantly attacking him. MSNBC calling him an insurrectionist who helped lead the charge on January 6th. And then now it's the right wing attacking him too in very personal ways, releasing embarrassing videos and photos of him. Okay, so thing is, I was like, okay, did Kevin McCarthy's embarrassed that Cawthorn outed his orgies. So what does Kevin McCarthy do? Is he going to hire some mules? Because there's a lot of unaffiliated mail-in ballots that the local news reported came in. Or was it Operation Chaos, you guys? That's the question. Do you guys all remember Operation Chaos? This is the term Rush Limbaugh came up with for the 2008 primaries when Obama was gaining steam. Rush said, hey, Republicans, go vote in these primaries for Hillary Clinton so that you divide the vote and create chaos within the Democrat Party. So Rush Limbaugh sent a bunch of Republicans to vote for Hillary Clinton when Obama had been the chosen one, just to create chaos on the left. Is the left doing an Operation Chaos against the right in North Carolina? That could be the case where not a lot of people vote in the primaries, and if enough people were recruited, hired to create an Operation Chaos, go knock on the door of one of these leftist hippies in Asheville and say, hey, do you want to register unaffiliated and go vote for a random Republican so that we can take down Madison Cawthorn? And I'm sure a leftist hippie would be like, oh, heck yeah, I heard Cawthorn's an insurrectionist. So is that what happened? I'm wondering what the heck happened, but Cawthorn lost by just 1,300 votes at last check. And now we have a random guy which we're going to hear a soundbite from the new random guy in Congress. And we're going to hear about whether he has the same balls in Congress that Cawthorn had, right? Because what we need right now is someone with balls. All right, let's listen first of all to Cawthorn on the night that just moments before he was about to lose the election. The local news reporter asked him about these embarrassing photos. There was a giant smear campaign launched against Madison Cawthorn before these primaries. I mean, the left and the right establishment were trying to take this guy down. It's pretty concerning based on the policies and values that you heard Cawthorn talk about were very in line with his constituents and with a lot of the American people. So to hear left and right hate him so much, it's like, why? Because he has the same values as a lot of us. Okay, so anyway, smear campaigns galore, including like naked photos or videos, all kinds of embarrassing stuff from the past. And this local news reporter asked him about that embarrassing stuff. Here it is.
Well, Congressman Madison Cawthorn coming across very confident tonight as he addressed those in attendance here, which makes this announcement all the more surprising. I got confirmation from Cawthorn's campaign spokesperson, Luke Ball, that Cawthorn personally called Chuck Edwards to concede, and he made that call before all precincts had reported their votes. Now, this has been quite a dramatic run-up to this primary election for Cawthorn, with district swapping, traffic and TSA violations, ethics complaints, and most recently, several provocative photos and videos surfacing of the congressman. And I did ask him about those photos and videos. Take a listen.
Congressman, there have been several photos and videos of you circulating online, on social media recently. What can you say to those constituents who maybe have lost some confidence in you and are looking for some other kind of leadership?
You know what, I'll tell you, there's been a coordinated strike carried out by really kind of the old establishment wing of our party. It's really something that I think is it's a loser's mentality. They realize the direction the country's going in, the direction that the population's going in, and if they want to be able to pay off people from my past to try and bring up old pictures or things that happened years and years ago, I feel free to let them do that. I think the American people will see through that.
And it was just a few minutes after he answered my question that we heard he had officially conceded. Cawthorn is no longer here on the property. We're told he made the call to State Senator Chuck Edwards while he was in the car on the way home. So far, his social media accounts remain quiet.
So Cawthorn made it clear that those embarrassing attacks right before the primaries were led by people within his own party. The Republican Party establishment hates people like Madison Cawthorn. So next up comes the new guy, the random guy. His name is Chuck Edwards. He was a state senator from that same area of Western North Carolina. So, you know, it could be plausible that people wanted to vote for this guy because he was in local politics at the time. And let's face it, Western North Carolina in the mountains, it's very conservative people there. And if you put out an embarrassing photo of like Cawthorn goofing off wearing like lingerie or something at some sort of frat party, it's going to put a bad taste in the mouth of these very conservative people. I can tell you, after I left Fox, a lot of very conservative people gravitated to me. I got a bunch of new Instagram followers, and many of them were extremely conservative. And I post a pic of myself in a swimsuit at the pool. I lost thousands of followers because they were so offended to see me in a swimsuit at the pool, which is a very normal thing, by the way. But I'm just saying these are the sorts of things that offend very conservative people. So perhaps it is plausible that Cawthorn did indeed lose a lot of his constituents in the very conservative western mountains of North Carolina, and that possibly this was not something with McCarthy hiring mules. But that was just what popped into my head. McCarthy did not like the fact that Cawthorn outed him for his orgies. Okay. And guys, McCarthy, don't sue me. I'm just joking. I don't know if you do orgies or not, but for some reason you were really freaking offended by Cawthorn when he mentioned orgies and people that he used to look up to. Okay, Cawthorn has been calling out the rhinos in his party, so he hasn't made friends with the right or the left-wing establishment, and it just sadly backfired on him. You would think that, well, if a guy stays really loyal to America First values and his own constituents, it would work out for him. But we just did not see that happen just now in North Carolina. You guys asked about voting machines. The voting machines that they use in North Carolina, they use ES&S, Election Systems and Software. That is a voting machine. It's actually the most popular voting machine in America, and it is flawed. And it is flying under the radar with these other smaller machine companies having big publicity. I have been trying to raise the alarm about this voting machine after I outed the flaws in the machine. This is coverage that Fox censored. It's one of the mountain of reasons that I left Fox. Link down in my description. I have my uncensored coverage on my website, ivoryhecker.com. I linked specifically to the exact story on ES&S that I covered, showing the top guy in the company admitting, what can you do? You can take one ballot and you can feed that thing through the machine as many times as you want. That means that if an election judge can find themselves alone at the ballot, at the voting place, if they can get themselves, maybe it's lunch break and the other workers are out to lunch, you get yourself alone with that machine, you unlock the key, you unlock the bottom box with the key, pull those ballots out, you funnel them through as many times as you want while no one's looking. That is what you can indeed do with ES&S. Each time you feed it through, it'll count for a separate vote. Those are the machines being used in North Carolina. So there's a million things that could have happened in Madison Cawthorn's race, but it is sketchy AF, a lot going on. Now we have a random guy named Chuck Edwards as the new congressman from Western North Carolina. Here he is giving his speech last night.
I received a call from Congressman Cawthorn just a few minutes ago. Just as I expected, he presented himself in a very classy and humble way and offered his support to our campaign in absolutely any way that we could use him. And I'm extremely, extremely pleased that we're able to enter in this contest on that note. It has been a spirited contest in so many different ways. Like I said, primaries are tough. And I appreciate the chance that so many people were willing to step forward in this race to offer the voters such a wide array of choices.
All right, so Edwards' background. Is he going to be the new rock star like Cawthorn was? Cawthorn was big. He was loved by everybody, including Trump. Well, by everyone who was like a really red-blooded American. If you're a leftist, if you're on MSNBC, you believe that Cawthorn's Hitler himself. But so the new guy, Edwards, it says here, ballotpedia.com, Edwards was first elected to the North Carolina State Senate in 2016. Edwards told Jewish Insider that although he supported Cawthorn in wanted him to succeed. Edwards, quote, feels that Western North Carolina can do better. Edwards accused Cawthorn of increasing political tensions and criticized Cawthorn for suggesting supporters threaten House members to overturn the 2020 election results. Edwards contrasted his legislative experience to Cawthorn's, highlighting in particular sponsorship of a bill that banned the sanctuary cities in North Carolina and working on the state's balanced budget. Trump endorsed Cawthorn for re-election in March 2021. So Cawthorn's had Trump's endorsement for over a year. Cawthorn was first elected in 2020, so very short run for Cawthorn, but he's young, 26. He may have a very big political future still. And obviously we can hear from Edwards just in this little article that he's more of a timid guy. He doesn't want to make people feel bad. And he doesn't want to create political tensions because he's criticizing Cawthorn. So congrats, North Carolina. You invited a nice, timid little man who's going to enjoy, I don't know, maybe he'll enjoy sex-fueled orgies in Washington, the stuff that Cawthorn called out. I don't know. And then we can listen to, what were Cawthorn's values? What, are we even hearing what Cawthorn values, or is it just about, Cawthorn being an insurrectionist who sometimes wears women's lingerie? Let's see what Cawthorn's values are. He spoke in, this is December of last year.
And so I want to talk about what we have that control, and then I want to speak about really the most important part.
This is the guy y'all got rid of.
As Americans, as this next generation, as the leaders of this country, to be able to save the country. So number one, when we take power, I think first and foremost, our number one priority should be prosecuting Anthony Fauci for lying to Congress and putting him in prison. Well, I believe that the facing in this country is the Communist Chinese Party. Really, their ability to.
The greatest thing in this country is Communist Chinese Party, and Fauci needs to be prosecuted. All right, Fauci and China are breathing a sigh of relief today.
Infiltrate our world, to infiltrate our country, to influence things on the global stage. I believe, especially all of us in this room who are under 40 years old, they will be the enemy that we will be facing for the rest of this century. I genuinely believe that. So, because of their terrible mishandling of COVID-19, allowing it to be released from their country, I believe that we should seize all Chinese assets in the United States of America as a down payment for what they owe us.
Xi Jinping celebrating today.
Next, I genuinely believe that we need to launch some investigations when we take command. One, I want to figure out exactly why the NIH is torturing puppies in Africa. Number two, I want to understand why we are funding gain-of-function research. Number three, I would like to investigate President Joe Biden for, if you think about what happened, he does not. And I'll tell you, none of us in this room, I think, should take any joy in watching the cognitive decline of the president of the United States of America.
Okay, so anyway, Biden, Fauci, and Xi Jinping are happy men today because Cawthorn was coming after them, and Cawthorn has just been dismantled. Congratulations, North Carolina. Now you have a man who will be a little bit more polite to Fauci, Xi Jinping, and Biden. I guess we'll see how polite this new guy is to those guys, but he did criticize Cawthorn for his boldness. So apparently the new guy thinks that you should be less bold. We'll see what happens. But, this is just part of the onslaught of attacks that we've seen on anyone who has courage and boldness. We saw it happen to Matt Gaetz in Florida. Congressman Matt Gaetz has been viciously attacked by a smear campaign, never charged with anything, but everyone is spreading rumors that he's apparently sex trafficking people. So you see these attacks. Revolver actually put out an article about this, and they called it an East German tactic during the Soviet Union. It's called Zersetzung. The purpose of Zersetzung wasn't to win an election. After all, like most radical left governments so often do, East German, their elections were, let's just say, compromised. Okay, so instead, the purpose was to personally annihilate and designate a designated enemy. Just personally annihilate them, destroy their careers, their reputation, their friendship, their family, even their sanity. The end goal was to render the target utterly incapable of effective dissent or resistance to the regime. That was the East German tactic, Zersetzung. And this is, I was quoting from revolver.com, Revolver News. And so I guess it's revolver.news. So they are noting that the same sort of tactics are happening in the United States, which I think if we watched Trump's presidency, 2016 to 2020, it was very clear that those sorts of attacks are the way these days. And we all just need to be aware that no matter who we support, if that person represents us and our values as Americans, they're probably going to be annihilated, humiliated, embarrassed, and destroyed publicly. And we just have to take that all into account and understand that no matter who we like, these attacks, the more boldly that person stands for us, the more they're going to be attacked. And then we have to weigh out whether we still want to vote for them. And in North Carolina, and the issue with primaries is few people vote in primaries. Primaries never get hyped up. Some people don't even realize the primaries are happening, so it very well could be that establishment Republicans and leftists went door knocking and said, hey, can I help order you a ballot so that you can vote against Cawthorn, and I'll pay you for that. Could have happened. All they needed to do was hire 1,300 people. 1,300 people made the difference in dismantling this rising star, Madison Cawthorn. So he's out. It's quite stunning. All right. In other news, guess who else is out? Nina Jankowicz, the head of the new Disinformation Governance Board. She had a very short run. She was very unpopular off the bat. And she's out. CNN reports expert hired to run DHS newly created Disinformation Board resigns. The disinformation expert hired to run the Department of Homeland Security's newly created Disinformation Board has resigned after the department paused the board. Nina Jankowicz, a disinformation expert with experience. Hold up. By disinformation expert, they mean someone who's good at disinforming others. They're good at putting out propaganda. As you was blasted everywhere, it was very clear she was putting out propaganda in regards to many things, including Hunter Biden and even Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. So she was great. She was skilled at disinformation, yet they still fired her. What's going on? Nina Jankowicz, a disinformation expert, they say, with experience working in Ukraine and Russia, was tapped to helm the Disinformation Governance Board earlier this month. The interagency team was meant to coordinate department activities related to disinformation aimed at the U.S. population and infrastructure. But Jankowicz's appointment quickly drew condemnation from GOP lawmakers and right-wing media who pointed to her past tweets and statements regarding Hunter Biden's laptop and Christopher Steele, the author of the so-called Steele dossier, which was a disinformation piece against Trump meant to make people think that Trump was coordinating with Russia to screw up elections. So she's out, you guys, but that doesn't mean that the government's control of free flow of information is out. Okay, I felt that this whole Disinformation Governance Board was just like, I don't know, it was just symbolic of what was already happening. I mean, for over a year now, the Department of Homeland Security has been putting out bulletins about how the American people are domestic terrorists because of their views on the election and their views on the illness and the pandemic. So also Jen Psaki has said how the White House coordinates directly with Facebook to flag disinformation. What does Facebook do when it sees something it feels is disinformation? It deletes it. So White House is coordinating directly with these people. DHS in its bulletins is making it clear that if you post in a way that is critical of the pandemic, critical of the elections, you could be inflaming your audience, whoever's following your social media, and therefore you could be leading to domestic terrorism. So the best way to de-escalate everyone is to get rid of that post. Okay. So it's been clear, like nobody's being blatant about it, but from these bulletins from DHS calling out so-called disinformation, in addition to what Jen Psaki said about White House coordinating with Facebook, in addition to the mass censorship you're seeing on Facebook and every other major social media outlet, it is clear that U.S. censorship of free speech is a very clear and present problem, which appears to be in violation of our First Amendment. The fact that the U.S. government would be coordinating with social media, with free speech forums to censor free speech is what I would call an infringement on the First Amendment. But the White House isn't being completely blatant that they are violating the First Amendment, but it appears that that's happening. So whether this chick Nina is gone or not, free speech is still under assault in America. So they're getting rid of her as a symbol of that they still care about free speech, but really they don't. Thank you to Blaze for the super chat. Please watch Janesh D'Souza's new film in theaters this weekend. That's what I was going to bring up. Speaking of the mules, I'm being vague about that because I'm sure YouTube at some point, as this film gains traction, YouTube's going to have an algorithm in place to snuff out any video that mentions this film. But go check out Dinesh D'Souza's new film, link down below. He's putting it back in theaters, apparently 400 theaters across the U.S. I just checked the Houston area. And there's a bunch of different theaters. I live in the Houston area. So a bunch of different theaters that I can choose from to go watch this film, which documents video evidence of major corruption regarding the election. So check that out for sure, you guys. And also, I wanted to mention, you guys, that in yesterday's video, when we're talking about the upcoming World Health, the World Health Assembly, U.S. government proposed amendments that are going to be voted on at the World Health Assembly that appear to hand over some of our sovereignty to the WHO. Now, my guest yesterday encouraged people to write to their members of Congress in regards to this, and if Congress could put pressure on the White House to stop this crap, maybe we can even separate ourselves more from WHO. Apparently, there's legislation that's been presented to actually defund WHO. So are we going to defund WHO, or are we going to give the director of WHO dictatorial power? It may depend on how loud the American people can scream at their members of Congress. Anyway, one of my viewers said that he had written to U.S. Senator Pat Toomey about this, and I heard back from him. So thanks to Doug for forwarding me that letter from Senator Toomey. I posted a copy of the letter on the community tab of my YouTube page. But I'll just quote part of the letter. Pat Toomey said, quote, "As you may know, if the President of the United States decides to sign an international treaty, 2/3 of the United States Senate must ratify the treaty before it takes effect. I take this constitutionally mandated responsibility very seriously and am strongly opposed to any attempt to ignore the constitutional agreements and political commitments between heads of government without the consent of the Senate. However, neither executive agreements nor political commitments are binding under domestic U.S. law, and both can be revoked or reversed unilaterally by subsequent administrations. Specific to your concerns, in December 2021, the World Health Assembly the World Health Organization's governing forum voted in favor of drafting an international agreement aimed at preventing and responding to future global pandemics. The WHA envisions that the agreement will provide a legally binding framework for global pandemic procedures. WHO member states will have until August 2022 to decide upon an initial draft, and a final agreement will be ratified in May 2024. The Biden administration has publicly stated that while it will take part in the negotiations, it will ultimately oppose a binding treaty. That last sentence I don't believe, because I read the letter from the Biden administration department, HHA, Health and Human Services. They're the ones who wrote the letter proposing these amendments that give the WHO director greater dictatorial power in deciding, telling the world, well, this or that is an emergency, so we need to enact emergency procedures. So anyway, that was interesting to get Pat Toomey's response, where he kind of goes back and forth on it, and like, what are you getting at, dude? But who knows? Toomey started the letter by saying basically the needle is great, and congrats to America for pushing the needle. So that's where Toomey stands and everything. But, just before the show today, I got a couple other emails from people saying that they also heard back from their members of Congress. So let me know if you guys hear back from your members of Congress on this upcoming World Health Assembly meeting in Geneva, Switzerland, which is next Sunday through Saturday, in which apparently American representatives will be voting on amending the treaty on global health emergencies. Okay, guys, with that being said, thanks so much for joining in, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.